She popped the champagne the second the judge slammed the gavel. Lacey thought she had won the ultimate prize: the wealthy husband, the sprawling estate in the hills, and the credit card with no limit. She watched the ex-wife Vivian walk out of the courtroom with nothing but a small briefcase and a strange, quiet smile, thinking she was a defeated woman. But Lacey was about to learn a brutal lesson in economics. She didn't realize that she hadn't just stolen a husband. She had stolen a parasite. And the host. She had just left the building. The ink on the divorce papers was barely dry when Grant booked the table at Le Ciel, the most expensive rooftop restaurant in the city. It was the kind of place where the waiters knew your net worth before they poured your water. Lacey sat across from him, beaming. She smoothed out the skirt of her red dress, a dress Grant had bought her last week, and raised her crystal flute. "To us," she purred, clinking her glass against his. "And to freedom." Grant leaned back, looking every bit the triumphant king. He was handsome in that rugged, silver fox sort of way that screamed, "Executive." "To freedom," he agreed, taking a sip of the vintage Dom Perignon. "Vivian didn't even fight for the house. Can you believe that 20 years of marriage and she just signed?" She looked tired. "She knew she couldn't compete, baby," Lacey said, reaching across the table to stroke his hand. "She's old news. You needed someone who matches your energy, someone who appreciates the empire you built." Grant puffed up his chest slightly. "Exactly. She became so boring. Always talking about budgets and risk management. I'm a CEO, for God's sake. I don't want to come home to a spreadsheet. I want to come home to this." He gestured to Lacey. Lacey giggled. She was 26, a former fitness instructor who had met Grant at his private club. She had played the long game perfectly. First the sympathetic ear when he complained about his cold wife. Then the accidental touches. Finally, the ultimatum. And today, she had won. The cold wife, Vivian, was out. Lacey was in. "So," Lacey said, her eyes sparkling, "when do I get the keys? I've already picked out a new color for the master bedroom. That beige Vivian liked is just so depressing." "The keys are in my pocket." Grant grinned. "She moved out this afternoon. The house is ours, Lacey. All 6,000 square feet of it." Lacey shivered with delight. She had Googled the property, of course. It was valued at $4 million. A pool, a guest house, a wine cellar. It was the life she deserved. "I still can't believe she didn't ask for alimony," Lacey mused, slicing into her filet mignon. Was she that desperate to get away? Grant shrugged, dismissing the thought. "My lawyer, Mr. Sterling, said she probably felt guilty. She knows she didn't contribute much to my success in the last few years. She just stayed home, handled the household affairs. I made the money. It's only fair I keep it." At that moment, the waiter approached with the bill. Grant didn't even look at it. He pulled out his heavy black American Express card, the one Lacey loved to see, and slapped it into the leather folio. "Put a 20% tip on it," Grant said casually. They waited. 1 minute passed, then 3. The waiter returned, looking uncomfortable. He leaned down, his voice a hushed whisper. "I'm terribly sorry, sir. The card was declined." Lacey froze. Grant let out a harsh laugh. "Don't be ridiculous. Run it again. It's an Amex Black. It doesn't decline. We tried it 3 times, sir. It says, account frozen." Grant's face turned a shade of red that matched Lacey's dress. "Here," he snapped, pulling out a visa. "Use the corporate card." The waiter took it and retreated. Lacey watched Grant's jaw tighten. "Probably just a glitch," she said soothingly, though a tiny knot of anxiety formed in her stomach. "You know how banks are." The waiter returned even faster this time. "Declined, sir. Reported as lost or stolen." The silence at the table was deafening. People at nearby tables were starting to glance over. I don't understand," Grant stammered. He patted his pockets and pulled out a sleek silver debit card. "This is the joint checking. There's over 200 grand in there. Try this." Lacey held her breath. She watched the waiter walk to the terminal at the station nearby. She saw the red light flash. The waiter came back, looking pitying now. "I'm sorry, sir. Do you have cash?" Grant didn't have cash. He never carried cash. He was a man who lived on plastic and credit. Lacey felt a cold sweat prickle her neck. "Grant, what is going on?" "I don't know," he hissed, humiliated. "Vivian must have messed something up before she left. She probably forgot to transfer the authorization. I'll call the bank in the morning and scream at someone until they're fired." In the end, Lacey had to pay. She dug into her small clutch and pulled out her own credit card, one with a $2,000 limit she had been trying to pay off for months. The bill for the dinner was $800. She handed it over with a shaking hand. "It's okay, baby," Grant said, regaining his composure as they walked to the elevator, leaving the whispers of the restaurant behind them. "Just a clerical error. Once we get to the house, we'll laugh about this. I've got a bottle of 1942 Dom in the cellar worth more than that entire meal." Lacey nodded, trying to smile. The house, she told herself. Focus on the house. The drive to the estate was quiet. Grant was furiously texting his lawyer, who wasn't replying because it was 10:30 p.m. on a Friday. Lacey stared out the window as they wound up the private road into the exclusive gated community of Highland Creek. This was it. The moment she had dreamed of. They pulled up to the massive iron gates. Grant rolled down the window to punch in the code. Access denied. "What the hell?" Grant slammed his hand against the steering wheel. "She changed the gate code. That petty woman." "Is there a manual override?" Lacey asked. "I have the clicker," he muttered, grabbing a remote from the visor. He pressed it. The gates groaned and swung open. "See? She can't keep me out. It's my house. My name is on the deed." They drove up the long, winding driveway. The mansion loomed ahead, a beautiful, sprawling structure of stone and glass. But something looked different. It was dark. Usually the landscape lighting washed the house in a warm, golden glow. The fountain in the center of the circular driveway was usually dancing with water. Tonight, the fountain was dry and the house was a black silhouette against the night sky. "Power must be out in the neighborhood," Grant grumbled. He parked his Mercedes leased. Lacey recalled him mentioning once, and they got out. Lacey's heels clicked on the stone walkway. She reached the massive double oak doors. Grant fumbled with his keys. He shoved the key into the lock and turned. The door swung open. "Welcome home, sweetheart," Grant said, reaching for the light switch in the foyer. He flipped it. Nothing happened. "Damn it," Grant cursed. She turned off the main breaker. "Hold on, let me use my phone flashlight." He illuminated the space and Lacey gasped. It wasn't a gasp of wonder. It was a gasp of horror. The foyer was empty. Not just tidy empty. Empty, empty. The grand antique mirror that had hung in the entryway. Gone. The Persian runner rug that stretched down the hall. Gone. The massive crystal chandelier that usually hung overhead. Lacey looked up. Wires dangled from the ceiling where the chandelier used to be. "She took the chandelier," Lacey whispered. Who takes a chandelier? Vivian! Grant roared, his voice echoing in the hollow house. He ran into the living room, his flashlight beam dancing frantically around the room. Lacey followed him, her heart sinking lower with every step. The living room was stripped bare. The Italian leather sofas, the grand piano, the 85-inch television, the curtains, even the curtain rods were gone. They ran to the kitchen. The Sub-Zero fridge was there, but when Grant yanked it open, it was empty and warm. The light didn't turn on. The power isn't out in the neighborhood, Lacey realized, looking out the window at the brightly lit house next door. The power has been cut off. She didn't pay the bill, Grant seethed. She handles the bills. She did this on purpose to spite me. Grant, Lacey said, her voice trembling. Look at the walls. He shone the light where she pointed. In the spots where expensive art had once hung original pieces by local artists that Grant always bragged about, there were just white squares on the fading paint. But it was what was left that was most disturbing. On the kitchen island, sitting alone in the center of the granite countertop, was a single red envelope. Grant snatched it up. He tore it open. Lacey peered over his shoulder. Inside was a single index card with handwriting that was elegant, sharp, and unmistakably Vivian's. It didn't say "Go to hell." It didn't say "I hate you." It listed 3 names and 3 phone numbers. 1. Mr. Henderson, Landlord. 2. First National Bank, Repossession. Dept 3. Highland Creek Homeowners Association. At the bottom, she had written one sentence: I hope you can afford the rent. V. Rent. Lacey asked, her voice high and tight. Grant, you told me you owned this house. You said your name was on the deed. Grant was staring at the card, his face pale in the harsh light of the cell phone beam. The company pays for the lease. It's a corporate write-off. Vivian handled the paperwork. So you don't own it? It's practically mine, Grant yelled, turning on her. I've lived here for 10 years. I pay the account pays the rent. The account that was frozen at dinner, Lacey asked. Grant didn't answer. He turned and ran up the stairs toward the master bedroom. Lacey followed, dreading what she would find. The master bedroom was the worst of all. The California king bed was gone. The walk-in closet, which Lacey had fantasized about filling with her clothes, was entirely stripped. But Vivian had left one thing behind. Hanging in the center of the empty closet on a single wire hanger was Grant's tuxedo. Pinned to the lapel was a dry cleaning bill. She took everything, Grant whispered, sinking down onto the carpeted floor. She took the furniture. She took the art. She took the damn light bulbs. Lacey looked up at the ceiling fixture. The bulbs were indeed missing. Grant? Lacey said, standing in the doorway, clutching her purse. Who is the silent partner you always talk about? The one who funded your startup. Grant looked up, his eyes wild. What? You always said you were the face, and you had a silent partner who handled the capital. Who is it? Grant swallowed hard. It was Vivian's father. When he died, the trust passed to Vivian. Lacey felt the room spin. So, she said slowly, connecting the dots that she should have connected months ago. Vivian isn't just a housewife who manages the budget. She never came to the office. Grant defended himself weakly. She just signed checks. She was the bank, Grant. Lacey screamed, her composure finally snapping. She was the bank, and you just divorced the bank. The sound of a car engine revving outside made them both jump. Lacey ran to the window. Down in the driveway, a tow truck was backing up toward Grant's Mercedes. No, Grant gasped, scrambling up from the floor. No, no, no! He sprinted down the stairs, tripping in the dark. Lacey stayed at the window, watching the red lights of the tow truck illuminate the empty fountain. She watched as the driver hooked up the Mercedes. Grant ran out the front door, waving his arms, screaming. The driver handed him a clipboard. Grant stared at it, then slumped his shoulders. The car that Lacey loved to be seen in, was hoisted into the air. Lacey looked around the dark, empty room. She realized then that the victory dinner had been a funeral. She was standing in a rented corpse of a house with a man whose credit was worse than hers, and somewhere Vivian was probably sleeping soundly in a bed she actually owned. But Lacey didn't know the half of it yet. The nightmare was just beginning. The morning sun didn't stream through the curtains because there were no curtains. It glared harshly through the floor-to-ceiling windows, heating the empty master bedroom like a greenhouse. Lacey woke up with a stiff neck and a throbbing headache. For a split second, she forgot where she was. She reached out, expecting the high-thread count Egyptian cotton sheets of a luxury hotel, or the plush duvet she had picked out in her mind. Instead, her hand slapped against the rough, industrial-grade carpeting. She sat up. Grant was curled in a fetal position a few feet away, using his suit jacket as a pillow. He looked old in the daylight. Without the expensive grooming, the tailored suits standing crisp, and the aura of wealth, he just looked like a middle-aged man with thinning hair and bad posture. Grant, she kicked his shoe. Grant, wake up. We need to go to the bank. Grant groaned, rolling over. What time is it? It's 8:00 a.m. The bank opens in an hour. We need to fix this frozen account thing so we can buy a bed. My back is killing me. They had to call an Uber. Since the Mercedes was in an impound lot, and Lacey's car, a leased hatchback, was parked at her old apartment across town. They had no transport. Waiting on the curb of the multi-million-dollar estate for a Toyota Corolla to pick them up was the first humiliation of the day. The driver, a cheerful man named Roger, tried to make conversation. Nice house, you guys. Moving in or moving out? Moving in, Grant snapped, staring at his phone. He was trying to log into his mobile banking app. Damn it, invalid credentials. She changed the passwords. She changed my passwords. Can she do that? Lacey asked, checking her makeup in the compact mirror. She looked tired. I thought you were the account holder. It's a joint family trust, Grant muttered. Technically, she's the primary trustee. I'm the beneficiary, but I'm the one who makes the money. They directed the Uber not to the bank, but to Grant's office building downtown, Sterling and Stone Marketing. It was a boutique firm Grant had founded 15 years ago. This was his kingdom. Here he had power. Here Vivian was nobody. They rode the elevator to the 40th floor. Grant straightened his wrinkled shirt, trying to regain his composure. Watch, he told Lacey as the doors opened. I'll have the finance department cut a check for emergency funds. We'll get the car out of impound, and I'll have legal serve Vivian with a restraining order by lunch. The elevator dinged. They stepped into the sleek, glass-walled lobby. It was quiet. Too quiet. Usually the receptionist, a bubbly woman named Diane, would be answering phones. The desk was empty. Grant strode past the desk into the main bullpen. Where is everyone? He bellowed. Diane Peters. Why are the lights dimmed? The bullpen, usually buzzing with 20 creative directors and account managers, was a ghost town. Computer monitors were dark. Chairs were pushed in. Personal items, photos of dogs, mugs, plants were gone. Only one person was in the office. Sitting in the glass-walled conference room at the far end was a woman. She was calm, poised, and typing on a laptop. It was Vivian. She looked stunning. She wore a sharp emerald green power suit that complemented her deep, rich skin tone perfectly. Her hair was braided into an intricate regal crown atop her head. She didn't look like a heartbroken divorcee. She looked like a CEO. Grant stormed the conference room, slamming the door open. Lacey trailed behind, feeling small. "What is this?" Grant yelled, gesturing to the empty office. "Where is my staff? And what are you doing in my company?" Vivian didn't look up from her screen. She took a slow sip of tea. "Your company?" "Yes, Sterling and Stone." "Stone, I built this." "You built the brand," Vivian corrected, finally looking him in the eye. Her gaze was cool, detached. "You were the face. You were the handshake. But who incorporated the business?" "Grant." "Who put up the collateral? Who owns the intellectual property, the client list and the lease on this floor?" We did," Grant faltered. "No," Vivian said, sliding a thick document across the mahogany table. "The Harper Trust did. My father's trust. You signed the operating agreement 15 years ago. Did you never read it?" Grant stared at the document. I handle the big picture. I don't read every clause." "Evidently," Vivian said dryly. Clause 14, Section B. In the event of a dissolution of marriage initiated by the beneficiary Grant due to infidelity, all assets including client contracts, trade names and physical assets revert solely to the primary trustee, Vivian. The Stone in Sterling and Stone. That was my maiden name, Grant. You're just Sterling, and Sterling owns nothing. "You can't do this," Grant whispered, his face turning ashen. "I have employees. I have payroll." "You had employees," Vivian corrected. "I held a meeting yesterday afternoon while you were buying champagne. I offered them 2 choices. Stay with the current structure, which is dissolving, or join my new agency, Harper & Associates, located 2 floors up. I offered them a 10% raise and better benefits." She paused, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. They all took the offer, even Diane. Lacey spoke up for the first time, her voice shrill. "You can't just steal his whole life. That's illegal." Vivian's eyes shifted to Lacey. She didn't look angry. She looked at Lacey with the same pity one might have for a stray dog that had wandered into traffic. "I didn't steal anything, Lacey," Vivian said smoothly. "I simply repossessed my investment. Grant was a bad investment. High maintenance, low return, and depreciating value. I decided to liquidate." She stood up, closing her laptop. "Security is coming in 5 minutes to escort you out. I suggest you take your personal items." "Oh wait, you don't have any personal items here. The furniture belongs to the company. The company belongs to me." "Grant." Lacey grabbed his arm. "Do something, scream at her." But Grant was paralyzed. He was flipping through the contract, his eyes darting frantically over the legal jargon he had ignored for a decade. He realized with a sinking horror that Vivian hadn't just been a housewife. She had been the engine. He had just been the hood ornament. "Vivian," Grant croaked, his voice cracking. "The corporate card, the bank accounts, they're all linked to the trust. Everything," she confirmed. "You have your personal savings, of course, that account you opened last year." Grant turned pale. I spent it on the ring, and the trip to Cabo." Vivian glanced at the diamond on Lacey's finger. It was massive. Tacky, but massive. "Well," Vivian said, walking past them toward the door. "At least you have the ring. You might want to pawn it. Rent in this city is expensive when you don't have a corporate housing allowance." She stopped at the door and looked back one last time. "Oh, and Grant, I cancelled your cell phone plan this morning. It was a business expense. Have a nice life." She walked out. The click-clack of her heels on the polished concrete floor sounded like gunfire. 10 minutes later, 2 security guards men Grant had greeted by name for years escorted them to the elevator. They didn't make eye contact. They just pressed the button for the lobby. Grant and Lacey stood on the sidewalk outside the building. It started to rain. "So," Lacey said, her mascara starting to run, "you're broke. You're actually broke." "It's a temporary setback," Grant yelled over the traffic noise, though he looked like he was about to vomit. "I'm Grant Sterling. I have contacts. I have a reputation. I'll start a new firm. I'll poach the clients back." "With what money?" Lacey hissed. "You can't even buy a sandwich right now." Grant patted his pockets. He pulled out the platinum credit card that was now just a piece of useless plastic. "We need to go," he muttered. "We need to figure this out." "Go where?" Lacey screamed. "We can't go to the house. The power is off. There's no food. And you know what, I bet the rent isn't paid either." She was right. 3 weeks later, the temporary setback had become a permanent lifestyle. Lacey sat on the edge of the sagging mattress in the Blue Horizon Motel. It was located near the airport, the kind of place where the carpets felt damp even when they were dry, and the walls were thin enough to hear the couple next door arguing about drug money. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and despair. They had been evicted from the mansion 3 days after the victory dinner. It turned out the lease had a morality clause regarding the occupants, and since the trust stopped paying the landlord, Mr. Henderson had no patience for a squatter and his mistress. They had sold Lacey's engagement ring. Vivian was right. It was their only lifeline. But Grant, being Grant, had overpaid for it initially. He bought it for $40,000. The pawn shop gave them $8,000. That $8,000 was dwindling fast. Grant sat at the tiny wobbly desk in the corner, staring at a refurbished laptop he had bought off Craigslist. He was still wearing one of his suits, though it was wrinkled and stained with coffee. He refused to wear jeans. He said jeans were for subordinates. "Any luck?" Lacey asked, painting her nails. It was a nervous habit she had picked up. "These headhunters are idiots," Grant scoffed, slamming the laptop shut. "They keep offering me consultant roles or senior manager positions. Do they know who I am? I was a CEO. I'm not going to take orders from some 30-year-old MBA graduate." "Grant," Lacey said, her voice sharp. "We have $1,200 left. The motel is $400 a week. We need money. I'm working on it. I'm building a proposal for a new venture capital firm. Once they see my vision..." "Stop with the vision." Lacey stood up, throwing the nail polish bottle. It bounced off the carpet. "We can't eat vision. You need a job, a real job. Go work at Starbucks. Go drive a truck. I don't care." Grant stood up, his face reddening. "I will not demean myself. I am a brand." "You're a joke," Lacey shouted back. "I checked your LinkedIn, Grant. You know what people are saying. They're laughing at you. Vivian's agency just landed the Apex Tech account. That was your biggest client." "She took them." Grant winced. That hurt more than the poverty, the loss of status. "I need a suit cleaning," he deflected. "I have a meeting with Arthur Pendleton tomorrow. He's an old golf buddy. He'll invest." Grant spent $200 of their remaining cash to dry clean his suit and polish his shoes. He went to the meeting with Arthur. He came back 3 hours later, looking defeated. "Well," Lacey asked. He offered me a job," Grant muttered, loosening his tie. "That's great." "What is it?" "VP Director." Grant stared at the floor. "Sales associate. Commission only. selling solar panels door to door. Lacey let out a harsh, cruel laugh. Solar panels. The great Grant Sterling. I turned it down, he said quietly. You what? I turned it down. I'm not a door-to-door salesman. You are unemployed, Lacey screamed. She grabbed her purse. That's it. I'm done waiting for you to save us. Where are you going? To find a job, because one of us has to live in reality. Lacey walked out of the motel room, slamming the door. She took a bus, another humiliation, to the upscale gym downtown where she used to work. She hoped her old manager Kyle was still there. She had left in a blaze of glory 6 months ago, telling everyone she was retiring to be with her multi-millionaire fiancé. Walking back in was like swallowing glass. She approached the front desk. The girl working there was new young and fit just like Lacey used to be. Can I help you? The girl asked brightly. I'm here to see Kyle, Lacey said, clutching her purse. I used to work here. Kyle came out of the back office. When he saw Lacey, his eyebrows shot up. Lacey, wow, haven't seen you in a while. I thought you were living the high life in Highland Creek. I am, Lacey lied, forcing a smile. It's great. Amazing, but you know I'm bored. I miss the energy here. I was wondering if you had any shifts open, just for fun. Kyle looked her up and down. He noticed the scuff marks on her designer shoes. He noticed the anxiety in her eyes. He wasn't stupid. We're fully staffed on trainers, Kyle said slowly. But we lost our cleaning crew last week. I need someone for the locker rooms and towel service. Minimum wage plus free gym access. Lacey felt tears pricking her eyes. Cleaning the locker rooms. Picking up wet towels from the women she used to train. I can't do that, she whispered. It's all I got. Lace, Kyle shrugged. Take it or leave it. She thought about the motel room. She thought about the dwindling cash. She thought about Grant sitting there in his wrinkled suit, waiting for a miracle that wasn't coming. I'll take it, she said, her voice trembling. When do I start? Tomorrow at 5:00 a.m. Don't be late. Lacey walked out of the gym. As she passed the juice bar, she saw a TV screen mounted on the wall. It was playing a local business news channel. The headline flashed across the screen. Woman of the Year, Vivian Harper, reinvents the marketing game. On the screen, Vivian was accepting an award. She was glowing, surrounded by applauding executives. She looked powerful. She looked free. The reporter asked her, Ms. Harper, what was the key to your sudden explosive growth this quarter? Vivian smiled at the camera. I cut out the dead weight, she said. Sometimes you have to prune the branches to save the tree. Lacey stood frozen on the sidewalk. She wasn't the winner. She wasn't the queen. She was the dead weight, and she was about to go home to the branch that had been cut off. When she got back to the motel, Grant was drinking cheap whiskey from a plastic cup. Did you get a job? He asked, slurring slightly. Yes, Lacey said, taking off her heels. I'm a towel girl. Good, Grant grunted, turning on the TV. At least one of us is bringing in some cash. Hey, can you spot me $20? I want to get a pizza. Lacey looked at him, the handsome, wealthy man she had destroyed a marriage for. Get it yourself, she said coldly. She went into the bathroom and locked the door. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror. She was young, she was pretty, and she was trapped. But the real twist, she wasn't pregnant yet. She had thought about trapping him with a baby months ago. Now she thanked God she hadn't. She looked at her phone. She still had Vivian's number saved from when she used to stalk her WhatsApp status. Her thumb hovered over the call button. What if I told her Lacey thought? What if I told her how pathetic he is now? Would she take him back? No. Vivian was smart. But maybe Vivian would pay to keep him away. A dark plan began to form in Lacey's mind. If she couldn't be the wife, and she couldn't be the mistress, maybe she could be the blackmailer. The Blue Horizon motel room felt smaller every day. The walls seemed to be closing in, stained with the smoke of previous occupants and the desperation of the current ones. It was 2:00 a.m. on a Tuesday. Grant was snoring loudly, a half-empty bottle of bourbon sitting on the nightstand next to his head. He had spent the day networking at a local dive bar, which mostly involved telling anyone who would listen that he used to drive a Mercedes. Lacey sat on the bathroom floor, the only place where the light wouldn't wake him. She was surrounded by papers. When they had been evicted from the mansion, Grant had managed to salvage one box of files from his home office before the landlord locked them out. He called it his legacy archive. Lacey called it the box of crap. But tonight, desperate and fueled by a cheap energy drink, Lacey was digging for gold. She flipped through old tax returns, meaningless awards, and golf scorecards. She was about to give up when her hand brushed against a heavy manila envelope taped to the bottom of the box. It wasn't labeled. Her heart skipped a beat. She peeled the tape back and opened it. Inside were bank statements. Not from First National or Chase. These were from a bank in the Cayman Islands. The account holder was listed as G. Sterling, Consulting. Lacey's eyes widened as she scanned the deposits. $50,000, wire transfer, $75,000, cash deposit, $120,000, offshore holding. The dates went back 5 years. The total balance was nearly zero now. Grant had clearly drained it to fund his lifestyle, but the source of the money was what mattered. Stapled to the back of the statements were invoices addressed to a construction firm known for city corruption scandals, Apex Builders. Lacey pieced it together. Grant hadn't just been a lazy husband. He had been taking kickbacks. He was accepting bribes from vendors to get them contracts with Vivian's company Sterling and Stone. He was funneling dirty money through an offshore account to hide it from Vivian. Lacey smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. If this got out, Sterling and Stone, now Harper and Associates, would be dragged through the mud. Vivian's reputation as the clean, ethical CEO would be destroyed. The SEC would investigate. Clients would flee. This was it. This was the leverage. Lacey took photos of every document with her phone. She hid the envelope in her purse. Then she crawled into the lumpy motel bed. But she didn't sleep. She spent the rest of the night rehearsing her speech. The next morning, while Grant was hungover and groaning in the shower, Lacey made the call. She called Vivian's office. "Harper and Associates executive line," a crisp voice answered. "I need to speak to Vivian," Lacey said, her voice steady. "Ms. Harper is in meetings all day. May I ask who is calling? Tell her it's Lacey. Tell her I found the Cayman file. Tell her if she doesn't meet me in 1 hour, I'm emailing it to the Department of Justice and the City Chronicle." There was a pause. A long, heavy silence. Then the assistant's voice returned, sounding slightly strained. "Ms. Harper will meet you at 11:00 a.m. There is a coffee shop on 4th and Main called The Roastery. Do not be late." Lacey hung up. She felt a surge of adrenaline. She put on her best outfit, a white blazer that was slightly stained at the cuff, but it was all she had. She put on big sunglasses. "Where are you going?" Grant asked, stepping out of the bathroom with a towel around his waist. He looked puffy and miserable. I have a meeting, Lacey said vaguely. I'm going to get us our money back. Did you find a better job? Grant asked, hopeful. Something like that. Lacey took the bus downtown. She arrived at the roastery 10 minutes early. She chose a booth in the back, facing the door. She wanted to see Vivian walk in. She wanted to see the fear in the older woman's eyes. At 11:00 a.m. sharp, a black town car pulled up outside. The driver opened the door, and Vivian stepped out. She looked impeccable. She wore a tailored navy suit, pearls and heels that cost more than Lacey's entire life savings. She walked into the coffee shop, scanning the room. When her eyes landed on Lacey, there was no fear. There was only annoyance. Vivian walked over and sat down. She didn't order coffee. She placed her expensive handbag on the table and folded her hands. You have 5 minutes, Lacey. I have a lunch reservation at noon. Lacey pulled the envelope out of her purse and slammed it onto the table. Cut the act, Vivian. I know everything. Vivian glanced at the envelope but didn't touch it. Do you... I know Grant was taking bribes from Apex Builders, Lacey hissed, leaning in. I know he was funneling money into a Cayman account, and I know that since he was the CEO of your company, you are liable. If this gets out, your Woman of the Year award goes in the trash. Your stock price tanks. You go to prison for fraud. Vivian stared at her, her expression unreadable. So here's the deal. Lacey continued, feeling powerful. I want $500,000 in cash today, and I want a plane ticket to Paris. You give me that, and I burn these papers. I disappear. Lacey leaned back, crossing her arms. Or I destroy you. The coffee shop was noisy with the sound of espresso machines and chatter, but at their table the air was thick with tension. Vivian looked at the envelope. Then she looked at Lacey. Slowly, a smile spread across her face. It wasn't a nervous smile. It was the smile of a predator looking at a wounded rabbit. Oh, Lacey. Vivian sighed, shaking her head. You really are perfect for him. You're both so confidently incompetent. Excuse me, Lacey snapped. Open the envelope, Lacey. Look at the dates on the Cayman statements. Lacey frowned. She pulled out the papers. 2021. 2022. What about them? Now, Vivian said, reaching into her own handbag. She pulled out a sleek, leather-bound folder. Look at this. She slid a document across the table. It was a notarized affidavit stamped by the district attorney's office. I discovered Grant's Cayman account 2 years ago, Vivian said calmly. I hired a forensic accountant when the numbers didn't add up. I found the bribes. I found the kickbacks. Lacey went cold. You knew. Of course I knew. Vivian laughed softly. I'm the one who reported him. Lacey felt the blood drain from her face. You reported him. But he's your husband. It's your company. Which is exactly why I had to insulate myself, Vivian explained, speaking as if she were teaching a slow child. This document here. This is an immunity deal. I turned over all the evidence of Grant's embezzlement to the authorities 18 months ago. In exchange for my cooperation and for restructuring the company to remove him, the DA agreed to treat me as a victim, or witness, not a co-conspirator. Vivian tapped a perfectly manicured nail on the table. They've been building a case against Apex Builders for years. Grant is just a small fish they're using to catch the sharks. They asked me to keep him in place to let him keep thinking he was getting away with it, so they could track the money flow. Lacey stared at her mouth open. So, you didn't divorce him because of me? Vivian let out a genuine hearty laugh. Oh, honey, No, you were just a convenient excuse. I was waiting for the DA to give me the green light to cut ties. When you came along with your little affair, it was a gift. It gave me the perfect personal reason to file for divorce, quickly, without alerting Grant's criminal partners that the feds were watching. Lacey felt sick. She hadn't stolen a husband. She had walked into a federal sting operation. So, Lacey whispered, Grant is going to jail. Eventually. Vivian shrugged. Once the indictment drops, probably 5 to 10 years, racketeering fraud tax evasion. Vivian leaned forward, her eyes hardening. But here is the part that concerns you, Lacey. Vivian flipped a page in her leather folder. She pointed to a highlighted section on a bank transfer log. See these withdrawals from the Cayman account? Vivian asked. May 14th, $12,000. June 3rd, $8, $500. August 20th, $20,000. I don't know what those are, Lacey stammered. Don't you? Vivian raised an eyebrow. May 14th was the day you bought that Cartier watch you posted on Instagram. June 3rd was the down payment on your leased Audi. August 20th was the trip to St. Bart's. Vivian pulled out another photo, a screenshot of Lacey's own social media. Lacey was holding a stack of cash on a boat captioned, "Sht blessed, mash spoiled." You spent the stolen money, Lacey, Vivian said, her voice dropping to a whisper. And under the law, since you accepted gifts and funds derived from criminal activity, that makes you a beneficiary of the fraud. Or if the prosecutor is feeling mean, an accessory. Lacey gripped the table. The room was spinning. I didn't know he told me it was his bonus. Ignorance is not a legal defense, Vivian said cold-heartedly, especially when you are actively trying to blackmail a witness with evidence of the crime. That's obstruction of justice, Lacey. That's a felony on its own. Vivian reached out and gently took the manila envelope from Lacey's shaking hands. So here is how this is going to go, Vivian said, putting the envelope into her bag. You are going to walk out of here. You are going to forget you ever saw these papers. You are not going to ask me for $500,000. You aren't even going to ask me for $5. And if I don't, Lacey choked out, then I hand this recording. Vivian tapped her phone, which had been face down on the table recording the entire conversation, to the FBI agent handling Grant's case. They're looking for leverage to make Grant plead guilty. Threatening to arrest his pretty little mistress would be excellent leverage. Lacey stood up. Her legs felt like jelly. She looked at Vivian. This woman she had called old and boring. She was the most terrifying person Lacey had ever met. What about Grant? Lacey asked. Does he know? No, Vivian said, standing up and smoothing her skirt. And you're not going to tell him. Because if he panics and runs, the deal is off, and I'll tell the feds you tipped him off. Vivian checked her watch. I have to go. My lunch date hates it when I'm late. It was nice chatting with you, Lacey. Enjoy the motel. Vivian walked out, her head held high. She signaled her driver, slipped into the town car, and glided away into the traffic. Lacey stood alone in the coffee shop. She felt exposed, vulnerable, and incredibly stupid. She walked back to the bus stop in a daze. The blackmail plan had backfired so spectacularly that she was lucky to be walking free. When she got back to the Blue Horizon motel, the door was ajar. Her heart hammered. Had Grant found out? Had the police come already? She pushed the door open. The room was trashed. The few clothes they had were scattered everywhere. The TV was smashed. Grant was sitting on the floor, holding his head in his hands. He was rocking back and forth. Grant, Lacey asked cautiously. What happened? Grant looked up. His eyes were bloodshot and wild. He held up a piece of paper. It was a letter. My lawyer, my old lawyer Sterling, he finally called me back, Grant rasped. He said he's been subpoenaed. He said the FBI raided the Apex Builders office this morning. Grant scrambled to his feet, grabbing Lacey by the shoulders. He smelled of fear and sweat. They know, Lacey. They know about the Cayman money. Vivian. She set me up. She must have told them. Lacey looked at him. She saw the panic. She saw the impending doom. For a second, she thought about comforting him. She thought about sticking by him like a loyal partner. Then she remembered Vivian's words. You spent the stolen money. If she stayed with Grant, she would go down with him. The police would connect her to the lifestyle, the gifts, the cash. But if she left, if she ran now, maybe she could claim she was just a victim, a girl who got duped by a con man. Grant, Lacey said softly, we need to leave. We need to run. Yes? Grant nodded frantically. We can go to Mexico. I have a friend in Cabo. Okay, Lacey said. You go get the car. The Mercedes is gone, but we can steal a car or take a taxi to the border. You pack the bags, Grant yelled, grabbing his jacket. I'll go find a ride. Meet me in the parking lot in 10 minutes. Grant ran out the door, fueled by the adrenaline of a hunted man. Lacey watched him go. The second he was out of sight, she grabbed her purse. She didn't pack a bag. She didn't grab Grant's clothes. She looked at the engagement ring, the fake cubic zirconia one she had bought at a drugstore to replace the real one they sold. She took it off and dropped it on the dirty carpet. She walked out of the room. But she didn't go to the parking lot. She walked out the back exit of the motel, cut through a hole in the chain-link fence, and ran toward the train station. She had $40 in her pocket. It was enough for a ticket to her sister's house in Ohio. Her sister who hated Grant. Her sister who lived in a trailer park, but was honest. Lacey didn't look back. She left Grant Sterling to face the FBI, the debts and the wrath of Vivian Harper alone. But as she sat on the train, watching the city fade away, Lacey realized the story wasn't quite over. She had escaped the law for now, but she carried a secret. She looked down at her stomach. She had been feeling nauseous all week. She thought it was stress. But as the train rattled over the tracks, she did the math. She was late. She was pregnant. And the father was a man who was about to be federal prisoner, number 84720. 5 years later, the dust had settled, but the landscapes of 3 lives had changed forever. Grant Sterling, once the king of the boardroom, was now inmate 84720 at the Federal Correctional Institution in Morgantown. The silver fox was gone. He was balding gray and worked in the prison laundry for 12 cents an hour. He spent his days bragging to other inmates about the emperor he used to run, though fewer and fewer listened. He never received visitors. He wrote letters to Vivian for the first year, begging, then threatening, then apologizing, but they were all returned unopened. Vivian Harper, on the other hand, had never looked better. Harper and Associates had gone global, opening offices in London and Tokyo. She was featured on the cover of Forbes under the headline, "The Phoenix of Marketing." She hadn't remarried. She told her friends that she had spent 20 years raising a man-child, and she was finally enjoying her empty nest. She spent her summers in Tuscany and her winters in Aspen, living the life Grant had pretended to provide, paid for by the fortune she had smart enough to protect. And then there was Lacey. Lacey lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment in Dayton, Ohio. The glamour of the city, the designer bags and the champagne brunches were distant memories that felt like a movie she had once watched. She worked double shifts at a diner called Betty's, wiping grease off tables and smiling at truckers for tips. Her hands were rough and her feet always hurt. On a rainy Tuesday, while wiping down the counter, Lacey glanced at a discarded newspaper a customer had left behind. There on the business page was a photo of Vivian. She was cutting a ribbon at a charity gala, looking radiant and powerful. Lacey felt a pang in her chest, but she didn't have time to dwell on it. "Mummy!" A small voice called out from the booth in the corner where he sat coloring. Lacey looked over. Her 4-year-old son Noah looked up at her. He had the same jawline as Grant. He had the same charming smile that hid a stubborn streak. Lacey walked over and smoothed his hair. She loved him more than anything. But every time she looked at him, she was reminded of the man who had ruined her life and the woman she had tried to destroy. She had thought she was stealing a prince from a wicked witch. In reality, she had saved the queen by stealing the court jester. "Come on, Noah," Lacey sighed, untying her apron. "Let's go home." She took her son's hand and walked out into the rain, a mistress who had won the prize, only to realize the prize was worthless. And that is the story of how Lacey and Grant learned the hard way that not everything that glitters is gold, and sometimes the person you think you're defeating is actually holding all the cards. Vivian played the long game and won, proving that financial literacy and self-respect are the ultimate revenge. What do you think? Did Vivian go too far by letting Grant dig his own grave, or did he get exactly what he deserved? And do you feel any sympathy for Lacey? Or was this just pure karma? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, karma, and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. I have a crazy drama coming up next week about a mother-in-law who tried to cancel a wedding, and you won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.